Thanks for joining Aviatrix Altitude Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gervickas. I have a great pleasure of introducing my guest today, who is Alex Sahadak. He's a seasoned infrastructure architect who brings a rich history of engineering experience from his current position at Covetrus to his past roles of institutions like the Maine Medical Center and systems engineering. Alex also served in the Air Force. Thank you for your service, and has had a long, rich history in the networking, engineering, and cloud infrastructure world. So welcome, Alex. Thanks for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to start with some of your service history and being with the Air Force and giving back. I know recently you did some work with, or you do work for the community for veterans. Tell me a little bit about what you do and how you help the veterans in your community.
Sure. Yeah. So originally, my start in IT actually was Air Force, right? So I joined the Air Force. Very passionate about our vets. Obviously, I'm a veteran myself. So whenever there's an opportunity to kind of help out local volunteer events, I capitalize on those. So this recent one basically was take a veteran fishing. So a couple of us, I would say a couple, probably 20, 25 boats, local bass fishermen took some veterans out on a private lake, had the whole spot reserved. So it was a fun day.
Oh, that's incredible. Did you catch anything? I guess that's the most important part.
Yes. So kind of the allure to that is it's a private lake. So, it's not commonly fished. So the fishing is very good there.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And what are you catching? Are you catching bass? Are you catching?
Primarily bass. Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. Outstanding. Well, I know you work for Covetrus. We won't go too deep about the company itself. Give me a little bit of background. What do you do for Covetrus? How are you helping them build out their infrastructure as an infrastructure architect there? And, give me a day in the life of Alex Sahadak.
Yeah. So we started at Covetrus, almost 5 years ago now. I had to think about that for a second. Wow. I started as a senior network engineer and just kind of moved up through the ranks to become an architect as I, learned the environment more and more. So day in the life is, anything from, responding to an outage to solving business issues with technology. It's like my favorite part of the job, obviously. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and everything in between. So we do it all here, mostly with a network focus as well.
So I know we've done some projects together. One of the reasons why you've come on the podcast, we've had a working relationship now for about 2.5 years already. Yeah. Incredible.
Time flies, huh?
I know it is incredible. Tell me some of the challenges you were having with the cloud infrastructure and how things were implemented, and what did you see that were the challenges that were able to be overcome with some of the implementations that we provided?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think we're unique in that, visibility for anybody in the cloud is generally a challenge. And initially, I think a lot of places have kind of the cloud as a wild, wild west, They get to a point where they start taking the cloud seriously, like, hey, this is real technology. These are real products. This is the future. This is our go forward path. Now we got to kind of go back and unpack, like, hey, there's this environment over here that was set up 5 years ago and I've just been kind of set it and forget it. And we have this environment over here and this acquisition and this company. And hey, we want to do this. We want to kind of transition, and trying to really package that all up in one kind of unified solution is very challenging, I think, for any company. So, we had all those challenges and then some unique, third-party integration challenges with like SAP and that. So yeah, it was a challenge. Aviatrix certainly helped.
Yeah. Like most enterprises, I see a lot of it throughout the enterprise is a lot of overlapping IP issues, right?
Right. Yes.
And the ability to be able to have multiple VPCs, multiple VNets, be able to talk over those. So I know one of the challenges there was that whole overlapping IP space, and being able to fix that for you guys. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have a very slick solution to help in that area for sure. And we definitely leverage that a lot. I think, any company of size, it's pretty much impossible in the cloud to not run into a situation where you're going to come across some sort of overlap at some point in time, especially when integrating with third-party providers and whatnot. So
yeah, absolutely. So your infrastructure, right? So you do a lot with the entire organization. I'm sure you can see mostly on networking. Tell me how the VMware acquisition has if any, has affected you guys, and what are your thoughts on that VMware acquisition and how they might pose some challenges for enterprises out there?
It's really hard to say exactly I don't want to say exposure, like it's a bad thing. I think it's a little too early to tell in a lot of senses. But I've done a little bit of research into it, and it sounds like it could be an exciting time. I don't know, specifically, but it's really interesting to see. I feel like the CSPs kind of stuck it to VMware for a while, and I think it's probably their turn to kind of flip the script and put a little bit of pressure. But if anything, I think it's going to be good for the consumer. So
yeah, there's been some interesting articles out there with regards to the number of organizations and enterprises who are probably going to move in some way, shape, or form. They may move a little bit away from VMware just because of the change in their subscription model. Right, they're moving away from a core license agreement to more of a subscription-based model. So the customers are challenged with that. And a large percentage of them are going to be moving them up into the clouds. Does your enterprise work a lot with VMware? Do you guys have a large VMware stack in place today? How that would pose that challenge, or
not what you would consider large?
Yeah, in general, a lot of your workloads have been moved to the cloud today, haven't they?
I would say, yeah. So Covetrus was kind of founded on like a cloud first mentality. So whatever could have been in the cloud, or like, hey, if we're doing anything net new, like let's pursue the cloud first, just because, agility, scalability, things of that nature. It's not necessarily cost. It's just the right business move, in my opinion. So yeah, wherever possible,
Yeah, all the abilities that come with having cloud infrastructure and the ability to be flexible and being able to deploy workloads really quickly. From an AI perspective, one, have you looked into AI at all? Are you guys doing anything? You specifically, Alex, not necessarily, your current employer, but you specifically, are you doing anything with AI today? Do you use it to leverage any of your work in your day to day?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, AI is scary, right? It's kind of so good at what it does. I've used it to, just a lot of testing of things like, hey, come up with a solution for X, Y, Z, given these variables, and it's pretty convincing. You definitely have to proofread it and change some stuff around, but even in like creating job postings, things of that nature, super helpful. It just does it. It basically is like has all the information at its fingertips, right? And it can very quickly produce what you need it to.
Do you leverage it at all when building out infrastructure, when you're working with your different devices in the environment, cloud devices, anything like that, where, hey, I need to do something really quickly. Let me punch in this question to AI and have it pop out and give you a good information back.
Yeah, all the time. And it's more prevalent, right? So a lot of the times if you're Googling something or whatever, like the first response is the AI response a lot of the times. And that's been fantastic. But yeah, just using it to solve, problems like, hey, I've got this routing issue I've never seen before. Give it a little bit of detail and it's usually pretty spot on. Obviously, trust but verify type of solution. But I've probably leveraged it more on like the business side, writing business cases, financials, things like that. Super helpful.
So primarily, what clouds are you in? What clouds are you working in today? And what are your biggest challenges throughout the environment?
Yeah, so I would definitely say AWS and Azure is probably the biggest footprint. The biggest challenges really just basically going back to the Wild West mentality of, is the cloud the future? Let's like finally take it seriously. So things like visibility is a challenge, right? If something is down or wrong, the cloud native tools aren't always fantastic at what they do in terms of, being able to find the issue, let alone, troubleshoot, etc. So I would definitely say visibility. And then also I find resiliency. The cloud stuff is great, right? It's the cloud. It never goes down, but it does sometimes. And there's not always an easy way to build that in using the cloud native solutions. So
no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. It does become a huge challenge for enterprises to be able to, one, the multi-cloud connectivity piece is always a challenge. Once you add multiple clouds, you inherently create new challenges for your consumers. of of those particular clouds. And really, you never know when you're going to get that second cloud or the third cloud or the fourth cloud, depending on what's happening. So yeah, those are some of the biggest challenges that we've seen out in the marketplace today. Another big challenge I've seen is security and securing those workloads. And how are those customers and how are those enterprises actually securing the workloads? A lot of enterprises right now are leveraging, large firewalls from vendors like Palo, from Fortinet, from Checkpoint, those types of large implementations. I've seen enterprises now start to use the cloud native tooling, right? The cloud native the cloud native firewalls themselves.
Mm-hmm.
How are you guys finding, or how do you find your security posture and ways to mitigate those blast areas in your environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely security is ever evolving, right? It's changing on a daily basis. If it's not, then it's definitely, you should invest a little bit more time into, making sure you're staying up to date. But yeah, it's a challenging thing. So I just think of some challenges that we have in terms of that you guys have good solutions for, data in flight, like end-to-end encryption, things like that. That's all super helpful and can be difficult to do, in the cloud natively or even with other, third-party, solutions, Palo Alto, Cisco. Throughput may become an issue, true end-to-end encryption, things of that nature.
So let's talk a little bit more about Alex. Let's jump into a little bit about you and your career trajectory. And so you're in the Air Force. What made you decide to get into networking? What was the pull into IT for Alex Sahadak?
Yeah, so actually my job in the Air Force, I was technically a network engineer. So my official job title was cyber transport. That was my AFSC. So yeah, it was fantastic. That's what got me in there. And I was really fortunate because it wasn't just like raw networking. We did a lot of telephony work, things of that, a lot of like physical, like layer 1 stuff, cabling, knowing how to terminate Cat5 cables, knowing how that stuff sort of works. I think, definitely lends itself to just a better understanding. I run across network engineers that, they've never terminated the Cat5 cable. So this one issue that's presenting itself is not obvious to them, right? Because they don't deal with it every day or have it in the past. So
Exactly. So did you actually build your own Cat5 cables? Because for a time I did. One of my first jobs was building Cat5 cables, and that was always a challenge because you had to keep the wiring correct. And
yeah, we definitely. So I don't want to say we weren't allowed to order cables, but we definitely manufactured pretty much 100% of our own cables. I was in a combat comm unit, so basically what that means is, communications.
Yep.
Everything's modularized. These plastic cases, stack them up. Sometimes 2 stacks might be next to each other. Sometimes they're 10 feet away. Sometimes they're a different tent. So just having the flexibility to, hey, I need a 8-foot cable, or I need a 3-foot cable. You're not going to carry around, a million patch cables, a million different cables with you. You're going to have a couple boxes of Cat5, Cat6. Some terminators, some crimpers, and get to work. So
yeah, when you're always constantly on the move too, right? You're in different base locations and working and rebuilding and pushing, and
every environment's unique.
Yeah, exactly. How often were you moving all that equipment? Where was it?
So lots of training, right? So I was it's Air National Guard out of Maine, and a lot of our missions, were basically staff augmentation for deployments. But also like stateside, a lot of like training environments, right? So like the Army, for example, would come to us and say, hey, we want you to provide our backbone network for this big training exercise we're doing. And, we'd get in there and help them establish that and do that. So doing that overseas as well. I know a bunch of people went to other countries to do the same thing. A lot of training support, but a lot of staff augmentation, for overseas folks as well.
So you get out of the Air Force. What was your first job out of the Air Force?
Yeah, I was actually, so again, Air National Guard. So I was in the Air Force full-time while I started, not full-time, I'm sorry, part-time, doing the weekend thing.
Yep.
And my very first job after coming back from all the training and all the other stuff, it takes a year or 2 years. The first job was actually, was a cable dog. I basically just ran cables, ran drops at a local Navy shipyard. So we did fiber and cabling.
Ah, excellent.
So that really reaffirmed the ability to do layer 1.
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah, you're full on layer one for a long time then.
Absolutely. So needless to say, that didn't last long, aspirations being what they are,
Yes.
nothing wrong with cabling by any means, but I had always wanted to kind of get relevant to my specific career in the Air Force. Well, shortly after that, I got into my first MSP, really small company out of Maine, and did that for a year or two and kind of really honed my skill set. And again, just kind of outgrew it, time for something a little bigger. I don't want to say better, but just different, keep that career path going.
What was the big iron that you're using at the MSP?
Adtran.
Adtran, interesting.
Yes. Yep. Very, very, I don't want to say old school, but very, very telephony heavy shop. So, and I actually think they got bought out by a local ISP a couple of years back. So the Adtran thing makes sense. I know Adtran's big in the ISP space. So, but right from there, systems engineering, and that was like drinking from the fire hose every day. And we used Cisco, Fortinet, SonicWall, you name it, we got it. And if we didn't do it, we were transitioning customers away from it, right? So you'd get a new customer and they had Checkpoint. Well, guess what? You need to know a little bit of Checkpoint at least to be able to, migrate away from that into something else. So that was a big one. That was fun.
So what else are you seeing in the industry right now? I know, in talking with you over the past 2.5 years, you've gotten a new passion, right? You're more passionate now about the cloud and learning the cloud infrastructure. What is it about the cloud infrastructure that is pulling you towards wanting to learn more about it and understand it?
I feel like it's kind of the great unknown. I mean, it's not unknown, but it's just there's a lot more to explore. I think there's better ways to solve problems in the cloud. You're less constrained by, I've got a physical server rack, I've got, this space here. It's kind of like limitless in a sense. That's definitely appealing. I'm a huge fan of, building things kind of the best they can be in terms of like resiliency and scalability. And I feel like the cloud gives, everybody that option. I remember back in the SE days, it was kind of like, go to the cloud, you'll save a bunch of money. And it's like, not really, but go to the cloud and you can, be super flexible and super scalable and move fast. I feel like that realization really came to be during COVID. I feel like the companies that were the most successful were the ones that realized like, hey, we have to shift and we can do that very quickly in the cloud.
Yeah, being able to have that flexibility, being able to deploy workloads in an instant is a huge factor in enterprises wanting to get up there and understand how to use that cloud. But you mentioned something interesting, and that is the cost of it. I know as the cloud matures for a lot of enterprises, I think there's always been this understanding that cloud could save you money, right? But I think the more infrastructure you build and the more complex it becomes and the more implementations of different aspects of it, whether it be cloud first technology, whether it be other technologies like a Palo or Cisco into the cloud, I think causes a little bit more cost. How do you see enterprises being able to mitigate that cost and be able to kind of leverage, maybe they're trying to leverage both on-prem and cloud?
Yeah, that's a deep one. There's a lot to unpack there. I think it's important to look at it more as cost offsetting as opposed to necessarily like cost savings. And what are you willing to do? If you have a bunch of on-prem stuff, then hey, you're kind of tied to having people localized in that area. Whereas cloud gives you some flexibility. Maybe you're 100% remote employees, and that gives you some flexibility as well. You don't have to necessarily, let's say you're located in New York where wages are pretty high. You're not necessarily targeting a senior engineer at the New York rate. You're putting it out there for the whole country or the whole world even. So I think there's some massive benefits to the cloud in that sense. The second part of your question in terms of like trying to balance both on-prem and cloud, if you can do 100% cloud, that's fantastic, right? But it's not realistic for many businesses, right? There's warehouses. You need an on-prem presence there. There's certain, data restrictions that would, maybe it's more beneficial to have something on-prem versus in the cloud. That's always a challenge, right? And it's unique case by case.
So a few years ago, I worked for a company. It was a small startup. Unfortunately, they're no longer in existence. They were bought, and it dealt with IoT security. Do you guys have a lot of IoT devices out there from a manufacturing perspective? Do you guys leverage that? How do you find, is there any challenge in the IoT space for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely do to a certain extent. And security is the biggest concern, right? With IoT, that's the hardest the hardest part. You might have a device on-prem that talks out to the cloud. It's like, what is it really talking to? Definitely don't want it to have access to other things within your environment. And I feel like that can get a little bit more complicated, like in the cloud as well.
Sure.
How are you treating egress traffic? How are you handling east-west traffic? Like those are all of a sudden issues now, right? When you introduce certain things into your environment. So
Yeah, I think from an IoT perspective, it is a challenge for a lot of customers out there. So what's next for Alex Sahadak? Where do you see yourself in a few years, looking back at your career trajectory? What is most intriguing to you? Is it AI? Does AI really intrigue you? Is it the more of a cloud-based infrastructure role? What are you thinking?
yeah, no, let's say AI is definitely intriguing, and it's the future, hands down, right? There's no
Yep.
way around it. I obviously I have a large network of, network engineers and folks that I talk to and past people I worked with. And there's really I see two main kind of trends happening with that. There's a lot of, I like doing it the old way, the on-prem switches are never going away. And that's just what I'm focusing on. And then there's really the other side of the folks that are like really embracing the new technology and how can we blow the lid off this thing? We're like kind of just at the beginning of what's possible, and it's really exciting. And then there's the folks that are just downright just like, AI is going to take all our jobs away. And if anything in technology has taught me, the more complex things get, the more need there is for like a human sitting there. And, your job might change drastically, right? You might not be sitting there actually configuring the switch anymore, but you're still going to be needed to do something, to maintain something. I look at it as an opportunity. I think it only creates jobs. I don't think it blows them away. So
Yeah, I agree. I think you look at how the industry has evolved over the years. You start with the mainframe. Mainframe is very centralized.
Yeah.
We move to PC. Everything gets decentralized. Then we get the internet, and the internet is completely decentralized. Right now, it's a global infrastructure that everybody can take advantage of in the world. I think AI just kind of complements all of that to make things easier, advance that much faster. Right?
Yeah.
I was watching one of our my CEO's interviews at one point, Doug Merritt of Aviatrix. Very similar to you. It's kind of scary, right? The foray of AI is very scary.
Mm-hmm.
However, it does provide an incredible opportunity, not only for enterprises to be able to take advantage of it, even though it's scary. They have the ability to take advantage of the AI and also kind of migrate that into almost like an industrial revolution of additional jobs, because people are going to have to know and understand how the AI works, how to get the best information out of all of those language models and all of the machine learnings that come out of it, and be able to apply that in other places.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. The industrial revolution of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
So long story short, Jason, to answer your actual question, where I see myself, my trajectory, definitely, AI related, cloud-based automation type functions. But yeah, I think really the next step for me is to move out of kind of an on-prem, I don't want to say focus, but just kind of leave that behind as much as possible and really just fully embrace the cloud and just be surrounded by, the cloud as much as possible.
Excellent. I know I can speak for myself because I've worked with you for 2.5 years. It's been a pleasure working with you. It's
absolutely.
You guys are great customers, fantastic people to work with. You're super smart. It's great to have the opportunity to work with you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast and giving us some insight into your world. And again, I want to thank you for your service. It's phenomenal that you put time and effort into that.
My pleasure. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without the Air Force, so I'm very fortunate and thankful.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on this Altitude podcast, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks, Alex.